Rev up your engine! Okay, we got a 2014 Mustang with a V6. Got a little shaky now. Now, it's a classic Mustang. I like the look of the more modern ones. For a while, they were kind of bizarre. Now they look more like the classic ones did when they gave up with all that Fox body nonsense. So it's a classic Mustang. Now, it doesn't have the V8 under the hood. As you can see, it's got a V6 engine, but it's got plenty of power for this small car. And this particular one is the one that you really want, because when you look inside, there's the water pump. A very easy job to change. This is not one of those V6s that has the internal water pump that runs off the timing chain, and then if it breaks, the water gets in the engine, destroys the whole engine. This is a very easy job to change. You don't have to worry about anything. You take the belt off and the bolt's in there, and it goes on and off. It's a very simple job. Now, that said, it's still modern enough, being a 14. There's no power steering pump. This thing has electric power steering. The power steering's adjustable. You can set it for various ways, for sport or for more comfort. The electronics work quite well. It does have traction control, but if you want to drive a little harsh, you can turn it off. Turn it up, listen to the motor. Starts right up, and as you can see, it's in sport shift mode. You can play with that to your heart's content. 6-speed automatic. They can easily handle that 6-cylinder engine. They're not known for having any particular problems. A lot of the guys, of course, they want the V8, la 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 la. Well, here's something. When I was young, people wanted a 289 V8. It put out 185 horsepower. This is a V6. It puts out 307 horsepower, so it's got plenty enough horsepower to move this thing around. Yeah, people say, oh, it's a V6. It's a well-made V6, and we're not talking about cheating with turbochargers, GDI injection. This is a normally injected, normally aspirated V6 engine. So 307 ponies out of this pony car. You might not even want to waste your money on a V8 if you're not racing the things around. Now, this Mustang's been a Pennsylvania car, so of course there'll be some kinds of rust. We'll look under. Still got the original muffler. I see superficial rust, but everything on it's solid. Frame, everything's still solid. Yeah, you got superficial rust, you're gonna see that, but nothing out of the ordinary. And really, for a V6 engine, it sounds decent. It's got dual exhaust. It's got a nice sound, and it went back to the classic instrument panel. I like that classic steering wheel. That's what these things are about. And they have figured this power steering out pretty good. It feels almost exactly like a regular power steering with a pump, only it's all electronic. Just don't have any tall friends, because they're not going to like sitting in the back seat. He bought it in March. It's October now, so he's had it a while. I got to put a battery in it, and one of the pins on the caliper on the front was stuck, and the guy had to free it up and reset it, put another one in. That's typical because, like I said, it's a Pennsylvania car. You're going to get rust on stuff. That's why if you live in a rust belt, you want to check your brakes every once in a while, because if those pins corrode, hey, put new ones in. You know, it's kind of a cheap design that Ford has. They slide on these pins, right? They could make them a little bit better than that, but it's cheap to make them on sliding pins. You're looking at one of these. If I bought one used up north here, first thing I'd do, I'd just take all the pins off, put new ones in, start over with new pins and rubbers. Then you don't even have to think about the stupid things then. And it's out of the way. That's something you should look for if you're going to buy one. It's no big deal. Anybody can do it themselves. Let's say you don't, and it freezes up, locks up on you on the highway, then you're SOL, you have to tow it someplace. They're such cheap parts. Do that yourself when you get the car. If you're a fan of classics, you can see this still has the solid rear end for people who like serious driving. They got it set up as good as they can for riding. It's not the independent suspension that later model ones have, but a lot of guys prefer this for fooling around with. So let's get out the old computer and see what's going on with this idle. Well, I got a new toy out here. Let's see how this works. The particular one is an X431 Pro 3S, volume 2.0. Now, you see my fancy thin car one that's like $6,000. This is the parent company of them, right? They claim it does a whole bunch that does, only this is more like $1,300 instead of $6,000. You can see it even has the same picture for intelligent diagnostics. And here we go. It read all the stuff. It didn't have the cool gambling machine twirl, the tick shows it. It still read the VIN number. You don't get all the bells and whistles, but hey, for $5,000 more, maybe you don't care. And here we go. System scan. Now there's no trouble code, so we'll look at live data. Start it up. And here we go, a little analysis here. Now you can see as it's idling that the exhaust on bank 1 is a little bit different than the exhaust on bank 2. They're not perfectly in alignment. You can see they're off a tiny bit. Not all that much, but enough to give you a little bit of a rolling idle. If it's not perfect at idle, you get a little bit of a shake at idle, which is typical as they wear. Nothing to worry about. You can see regularly the bank 2 subtracts more than the bank 1. It's always a higher number subtracting. You can see the intakes, they're a little bit closer. They're closer to each other. They're not as far apart. Which isn't surprising because generally the exhaust camshafts will wear out faster than the intake because they're taking more heat doing the exhaust valves. That's just common. It's not bad, but that'll give you a little bit of a rolling idle. Now, as you can see here, there is no air in any of the camshaft position sensors because it's such a small amount, it's never going to trip a code. It's got to be off 20% or more. But you can feel it. A human can feel it. Distance since brake override accelerator action occurred. 3,510 miles ago. It looks like the previous owner was driving like a maniac and the car decided it's going to brake itself to not cause any problems. It keeps all this information. So if you drive like a maniac, be forewarned. Guys like me can find that out real fast. Just hope the police don't get that information too soon. Maybe they'll start reading yours and taking all that information when they pull you over. Get a little scanner, hook it up. The oxygen sensors are working good. 1.0 is perfect, 0.99, 1.10, and the other one is 1.10, 0.99. Those are working perfect. See here, which is typical for a Mustang that's got some miles on it. The long-term fuel trim for bank 1 is 9.38, and for bank 2 it's 7.03, and that shows that the one side's a little bit more worn than the other, and it's adding a little bit more fuel. Now with the mileage that this has on, I would advise a fuel injection flush or some of that ATS fuel injection cleaner put in a gas tank, because they're probably a little bit dirty. It's adding a little more fuel than it probably should. It'd probably make it run a little bit better. Probably stop some of that rolling idle too by cleaning them. You can see this is red. The oxygen sensor trim circuit resistance, bank 1 and bank 2 are too high. He said that it did have a little oxygen sensor code, but it went away. It's a Pennsylvania car. I would advise disconnecting the oxygen sensor connectors, cleaning them with spray electrical cleaner, and then putting them back together, because the resistance is too high. That generally means corrosion got on the wires themselves, because they're working fine. The fuel trims are good, but the resistance in the wiring is too high. I'm assuming that's corroded. That could be cleaned. You get bad wiring from being rusty and salt in the winter. You can take them apart, spray them with spray electrical cleaner, then put them back on. So let's close the hood and take it for a ride. It's got a nice sound. It's automatically locked the doors, and the electric power steering. When they first came out, I wasn't a big fan because I'm the guy who has to fix them when they break. But I do have to say, they do work quite well. And it is a Mustang with a solid rear axle, so, you know, you're going to feel bumps when you're going on the road, especially here in Rhode Island. You can feel the 307 horsepower. There's no doubt in that. You step on the gas, it goes. It doesn't burn any oil at all yet either. And really, for somebody growing up with 60s Mustangs that rattled and clunked, these are pretty solid cars. This thing's going down the road, I don't hear a bunch of rattling or anything. It's quite smooth. Now, I gotta say, if you drove this thing, you'd start wondering, why would you buy a V8 engine? 307 horsepower in a small car is plenty enough horsepower. This little guy's got to prove you're the fastest man in town. It's got plenty of horsepower. It's held up well. It doesn't burn oil. It's a nice car. And considering paid $11,000 for it, still looks really nice. If you're thinking about getting a Mustang, you definitely might think about one of these. Now, his friend just bought one of those EcoBoost ones with the 4-cylinder engine and an automatic transmission. Those I do not advise buying. All my customers have bought those. None of them made it to 80,000, 90,000 miles before they had serious problems with that 4-cylinder turbocharged EcoBoost GDI engine. This is a normally aspirated V6 engine, 307 horsepower. Plenty of fun, reliable. You might change your mind. If you're thinking about buying one, road test one of these if you can find one for sale. And you can make up your own mind. For me, hey, I'm getting old. 307 horsepower, plenty enough. And he's a young guy. He's happy with it. He's not out to drag race people. He just wants to have a nice car to drive around. If he wants to go fast, it goes plenty fast. And after all, it's got the classic Mustang look. And it's even got dual exhaust too. So, unless you open the hood, nobody's gonna know. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.